Hi, good morning, and welcome to the Celebration Space. My name is Kaylee Phelps, and today we are talking about questions to ask before deciding on or choosing your venue. So I'm going to be posing a lot of these questions really for events across the board. So whether it's a wedding, I know a lot of people have been, getting engaged and exciting things going on despite the global health crisis and everything going on there. And then we have nonprofit events that are still going on. We have conferences. We have lots of things that we're hoping we'll be able to do in person as we move forward and hopefully things get figured out with the global health crisis. So this will be more of a well-rounded view at venues everywhere, whether you're looking at a conference center or you're looking at a smaller wedding venue or anything in between. So we're going to dive right into it, and really what you're typically going to get as far as information from a venue is you're going to know the date and time and availability. So that should be the first thing that you're looking for is this place even available for when you are looking to get married or hold your event. Also, the occupancy, how many people can fit in this space, what the space looks like, all of that good stuff. And then the pricing, really what you're going to be paying to have you host your event at this space. So those are the main things that you're looking at. But beyond that, there are a lot of questions, and working in the event space can get really tricky financially and then also logistically. So I wanted to just walk through some big questions that I think everyone should know about, and maybe you do, maybe you don't, and maybe this will help you just make sure that you have your T's crossed and your I's dotted. So really you want to focus on your vision and also your guests' experience as far as the logistics and of course the pricing. So really looking at what your big vision is, and then also making sure that you're not forgetting about your guests' experience, where they're going to park, where they're going to put their coats, maybe where they're staying overnight if they're flying in, how far you are from the airport, things like that. So as I've mentioned about the run of show or the show flow, just making sure that you're not forgetting about your guests, as often we are planning events and there's all these big pieces, but sometimes we forget about the little things. So we're going to start with questions around access to your venue. So the first thing around the access is I want to make sure that you ask, if you are holding an outdoor event, especially during the global health crisis, if there are any backup spaces available, or what the contingency plan is around if there is inclement weather, or also just making sure that you have an idea around safety and what that looks like with your venue. So then we also want to make sure that we look at your access pre-event and post-event. Are you able to access the venue space 24 hours before your event begins, or 5 hours before your event begins, or 2 hours before your event begins? And do you need to have all of your stuff out of there by midnight? Do you have access to stay there overnight and, clean something up, have everything out by 10 a.m. the next day? Or is it something where you need to get everything out of the main space, and then maybe you can have an office set aside for anything else that you can get out at a later time? Then, is there a place for truck access? Are you able to bring in, if you have pallets of packages, or if you have big equipment, or if you are using a decor vendor that's bringing in tables and chairs and things, do they have truckload access to be able to back things up and really get things in and out easily? Is there an office space where personal items can be stored during the event? So I just kind of touched on that a little bit, but I think this is really important, especially for, bridal parties or big events where you might need a landing place for your staff, and making sure that someone can have the key during the main event space, so you can have multiple keys, or have, if it is a hotel or a conference center, where you can have multiple key cards to be able to access that. So people know that their items are safe. Maybe it's a place where you have snacks and people can have a landing place there, but just making sure that you have that space available if it is something that can be included in your package, and also knowing if it is an added fee, it can be something that is definitely worth it, or maybe you just get a hotel room nearby depending on what the space looks like. Sorry, I have all of my notes over here. I have lots of questions for y'all. And also, is there a space for the bride to get ready, or for your staff to get ready, or if you have any honored guests? That could look like, at certain venues, they have like a bridal suite where people can get ready and they can bring in, people to do hair and nails and makeup. But it also could be they don't have that space available, but they can, book out a hotel room or do something a little bit different. You just want to know what's on site for you to use, what's included in your package, and then what you might need to look into as far as additional costs. Again, also making sure any staff is going to have space available as well if you have people working the event. Can anything be left overnight? We kind of talked about that. As far as guest access, making sure you know where the majority of your guests are coming from, whether they are driving, where are they going to be able to park? Is parking validated? How much are they going to have to park? Is it close to any airports? And what is the cost for people to either get a shuttle from the airport? Maybe that's free, or maybe what's the cost of an Uber or a Lyft? Or what's the cost of a taxi? Looking at the availability in the space from there. Also access to major highways if people are driving in. Also making sure that if you are in an outdoor space, making sure that you have bathrooms available if you need to rent any bathrooms to bring in, as far as those really fancy, trailer bathrooms that I've talked about before that I think are awesome, that I've seen at festivals, that are air conditioned or heated, and they are beautiful and have running water and all of these things. If you need to bring those in, or if there are bathrooms available on site if you're holding an outdoor event, or if they're close to your venue space where your tent is, or if you need to bring anything in. Also a coat check if you're holding an event during the winter and maybe it's an indoor-outdoor space. Where are people going to be able to put their coats? Are there coat, racks available? Are you going to have someone working a coat check? Or is it going to be more kind of take care of it yourself, put it on the back of your chair style? So those are the things that really are accessible. Also, if you are holding an event on site at a conference center, looking at the room block. Also, if that's a little too expensive, looking at the cost of other hotels in the area and getting a room block for that. And also seeing what the price is as far as a guest to stay at the hotel or get a shuttle and be able to come to your event from there. Just making sure that you're really factoring in different price points and what is accessible and available and maybe recommended by your venue. So from there, we're going to talk about if there are any other events going on at the same time. So if you have ever been to a big conference center, you might notice that you have your little lanyard on and your tote bag, and you're seeing people from other places, other color lanyards, other tote bags, and often there are conferences at those bigger places going on at the same time. So if you are in an event, you're the event runner or curator, you might be able to actually get a deal on having the same food and beverage as that other event, so that the kitchen just has to make a lot of food for two events at the same time. So finding out if there is another event going on at the same time, seeing if there are any discounts for having the same food and beverage at the same time, so that the kitchen is doing one thing rather than making one type of meal for one dinner at the same time as they're making another meal for another dinner. So, and along with that, are there any discounts available for different time frames? If you are running a conference on a weekend, it's probably going to be more expensive than if you did Tuesday to Thursday. Looking at different seasonality and when you're able to maybe get the best price point. Also factoring in the availability of your guests and what that's going to be best for them, but just making sure that you have your options covered. Also knowing if there's any discounts available if you're a nonprofit, or if it's something for veterans. Normally they have different discounts for different things. So just asking if there's any discounts available, really being transparent about what your event is for, and seeing how your venue might be able to work with you. Along the lines of money, are there any additional taxes, service fees, gratuity fees, or union labor costs associated with the venue or any recommended vendors? So I'm going to talk about in a little bit other vendors also associated with your venue, but just making sure that you have the full scope of all of the price points going into it, and whether those extra costs are factored in to your original cost up front, or if those are all added on at the end. So that's something, especially after running an event in Las Vegas, they have very specific union labor laws and different price points for that. They can't work over 8 hours, or you have to have people coming in and out and doing all these things, which is really great for the workers. It can get a little bit confusing on your side financially, and just doing the math of figuring all of that out. So making sure that you're really clear on that. The taxes vary from state to state. So if you're in one state and you're running an event in another state, being really clear about what all of those price points are going to look like and whether those costs are disclosed up front or whether they're going to be added on to the end. Also knowing if there is a minimum for any of the services required. If you're hiring someone for AV, are you going to have to pay them for 4 hours regardless if you're only going to be using them for 2 hours? Same with food. Do you have to meet a certain food minimum where you're paying for a certain amount of money for, maybe you have to hit $50,000 for your food and beverage minimum, which is going to make you think very differently about the flow of events for your event. Maybe you're planning on only covering 2 meals and all of a sudden you're like, well, I have to hit this minimum anyway. Those things can really affect your show flow and what your vision is for your event. So just making sure that you have that information up front. Also, with charges, can all the charges go to a master account, and how many people will be in charge of that master account? When will you get reporting? So if you have a multi-day event, can you get reports each day of where you're tracking along and against your minimums? And when will you have a full post-event report? Can you set up meetings either each day or, fully post-event, post-conference to be able to get in touch with all of those costs and fees? And again, how many authorized users are going to be able to use that, and how are they going to be differentiated from other people? Making sure that someone isn't just walking up to the person in charge of your master account and saying, hey, free shots for everyone. Making sure that you have very distinct points of contact in service flow to make sure that you do that. Not that that would actually happen, but just making sure that you know how that's all going to work out. And then also, like I mentioned earlier, are there any recommended or required vendors, on site? So a lot of times if you are working at a conference center, they have required, you have to run your food and beverage and your AV through them, your audio visual. But if you're working at a smaller venue, maybe you can bring in and out vendors. Maybe there are discounts associated for working with people. Certain wedding venues actually require you to use their entertainment services. So maybe they have a DJ that comes with the venue. So just knowing what is required and what might be recommended or associated with that. Also knowing when those people, if you are bringing people in, whether it's floral or decor, when you have access to the venue and when other vendors can come into the venue as well, so that they have enough time to get set up and get all of their ducks in a row before your event begins. Yeah, and then also with any other vendor that you're working with, you're going to want to ask a lot of the same questions about service fees, minimums, all of these things, making sure that you have the full scope not only of what you're doing with the venue and what vendors are associated with them and required of them, but any vendors that you end up bringing into your venue space, making sure that you have the full cost associated with them as well. Oh, and this is a big one. So if you're going to be serving alcohol or you're going to be handling any kind of raffle or gambling on site, maybe you're doing something like kind of a fun little casino night, or you're a nonprofit and you're running a raffle, making sure that you are very aware of the laws that are associated with your venue and your venue state, whether it's in your own state or out of state, making sure that you have your liquor license all settled, whether the venue has it or not, whether you need to get that pre-approved, making sure that you're always following fire codes. So a lot of times when you are laying out a bigger venue, especially, I think it's over a certain amount of people, but making sure that you have space between tables and fire exits and everything available. And then also making sure that if you have to do anything with gambling or anything associated with gambling, that you are able to be aware of those laws and make sure that you're following all of those protocols. And lastly, cancellation policies, making sure that you know what the cancellation policy is, if they have an act of God clause or a force majeure, which is something that has been a big deal as far as COVID is concerned, or if there's a hurricane in your area or, any kind of inclement weather that's going to affect your guests coming to your event or you being able to host your event. Making sure you know who your point person is at your venue and with each of your vendors, and if you are working at a conference center, if you are supposed to go through your point person to do everything with your vendors, or if you're supposed to be working with those individuals on an individual basis. And then also making sure that you know how often you can talk to that person, if you can have, how many walkthroughs you can have with other vendors walking through the space, when those can be scheduled. If you are having a conference, when you can do your pre-conference with everyone that should be involved. So whether the vendors are on site already and required, or if you can bring in other vendors to that, maybe that's those are floral or band or all of these other things, so that they know the show flow, and make sure that you are all on the same page as you're going into the production of your event. And yeah, those are all the things. That's a lot of questions kind of broken down into different areas, and I tried to keep it as general as possible for as far as if you're doing a wedding or a conference or a nonprofit event or a gala, any of these things. So if you have any other questions or things that maybe tripped up your event that you think are very important to throw in there, please recommend them below and let me know. If you have any questions, or maybe you're starting to plan your own event for 2021, or hopefully, if you're planning something for the remainder of 2020, God bless you, and I'm very happy to help out, since we only have a couple months left, and that must be stressful. But if you have any events coming up or any questions for me, please don't hesitate to reach out. And until next time, enjoy celebrating today.